So today I'd like to talk about accuracy and fluency and just try to explain how they're not the same thing and to give you some ideas about which one is more important to focus on. Both accuracy and fluency can be important. However, you need to decide for yourself what your language goals are and make sure you're focusing on the correct thing. In my experience of teaching in various countries, I find that exam preparation really influences what students focus on. It seems that most exams, especially state exams, for example, here in Poland, students have an 8th grade exam when they're leaving primary school, and there's also the Matura exam, which is like a high school leaving exam. And there's English elements to both of those exams, and they are very accuracy heavy. In other words, it's extremely important to use the correct language, use correct tenses, and not make mistakes, but it's less important to express your ideas clearly. Such students come to us for English lessons, and sometimes they know the grammar better than the teachers, but yet they can't have a conversation, or at least they don't feel comfortable having a conversation. It seems to me that that's a bit backwards. The purpose of a language is to communicate. So if you go through 10 years of schooling where you've been learning English the whole time, it seems to me you should be able to have a conversation. It just isn't the case. Some of these students come to me, they don't know why they don't know how to speak, even though their accuracy is pretty good. But yet, when they do start taking lessons, they still expect accuracy. They expect explicit grammar instruction, for example. So if you spend all these years focused only on accuracy to the detriment of fluency, then of course you won't be able to have those conversations. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn grammar, especially if you have an exam like the Matura coming up. However, neuroscience tells us a different part of the brain can use language, produce language, and it's a different part of the brain that understands information about language. Grammar is information about language, and if you're ever speaking and you stop to think, oh, what's the right tense here? You know that you have to stop talking. You can't be thinking about what is the right tense in this moment as you're speaking. It's impossible. In other words, your fluency goes down. Whereas if you had continued speaking and made a mistake with your tense, but still communicated what you wanted to communicate, that might have been okay, depending on the situation. Now, native speakers do not care if you make mistakes. We're used to speaking to non-native speakers, and in fact, there's many times more non-native English speakers than there are native. And the native speakers don't judge non-native speakers as harshly as non-natives judge other non-natives. So the mentality here in Poland is that accuracy matters, and in a perfect world, I think that's great. As an English teacher, I'm all about accuracy. English is a beautiful language, and you could be so eloquent in it, so beautiful with it. However, if your intention is to travel somewhere and just be able to ask for directions and order in a restaurant or start living somewhere and just have conversations with people about everyday topics, your accuracy doesn't matter and you won't be judged for it. When you come to someone like me for an English lesson, you really need to think about what's more important to me. Am I taking an exam and so accuracy is important? Or do I just want to be able to communicate and therefore fluency is more important? Or there is a third option, and that's where both are important. Let's say you work for an international company and you need to write emails to clients. Well, if you have lots of mistakes in there, then that'll come off as unprofessional. But we have lots and lots of tools nowadays. AI can help you with that kind of thing. Don't have AI write all your emails for you. Do it yourself. That's the only way you'll get better. But do have it check your work afterwards. that is a great compromise. So there are instances where both accuracy and fluency are very important. However, for the vast majority of people, especially in the beginning, fluency is more important. And I would argue that if you're accurate but you can't get your point across, then it doesn't matter. And so even in a business context with a high-stakes client, your fluency will be much more important. So you need to decide what's most important for you, fluency or accuracy. Do you need to be focusing on both, or maybe just one at a time for now? If you've had 10 years, for example, of English, and you've been focusing on accuracy the whole time, then maybe it's time to focus on fluency. A lot of our lessons are based on exactly that, real-world communication. So if you want to improve your accuracy, then you can use apps, you can get books, and you can practice. I think it's funny, a lot of students come to us and say, I haven't had a good teacher, I've been learning grammar for all these years and I still don't get it. And, I just want to tell them, look, I'm just another teacher who's going to explain the same grammar to you again. I don't think you're going to get it any better. The only way you're going to get it better is to use it and internalize it. So how do you get better at fluency? How do you increase your fluency? You have to use the language. You have to get over your fear of being judged. That's one nice benefit of being in a classroom, is you create a safe space. You get to know the people there. You trust one another. You trust the teacher. And you can open up, kind of be yourself. I don't think every classroom is that way, but that's the kind of environment I try to create for my students. Many people like to travel abroad to learn a language, maybe go do a camp in the UK or go to Malta or something like that. Is really brilliant because you immerse yourself. You just remember that nobody's judging you. First of all, if it's a camp, then you're still surrounded by other learners. Nobody's judging you, and the teachers are most certainly not judging you. They might be listening to your language and picking up on your errors, but that's not a bad thing. They're not doing it to judge you as a good or bad person. They're picking up on those things so they can help you improve and get better. I would be out of a job if everybody spoke perfect English. There's nothing to worry about there. Nothing to be shy about. I know it's easier said than done, but if you join a class and you sit there for an entire semester and you don't speak, then you're wasting your time, frankly, because you can open that same course book you're using in the class at home and work on it by yourself. You need to be listening and speaking and writing and reading. You need to be doing all of it. A better way of internalizing grammar is to learn it in chunks. So you could learn a sentence like, I've never been there before. Quite a simple sentence, and you can use that in many contexts. Have you ever been to Bali? No, I haven't. I've never been there before. In order to understand and use that, do you need to understand the present perfect? No, you don't. Will it help you to understand the present perfect to use that? No, not really. Why would it? If you internalize that and it comes up naturally, you'll never need to know the grammar rules. And in fact, that's the way your brain stores language. It stores it in chunks. It's the same way when you read a book. In the very beginning, you have to learn the sounds of the letters, right? And kind of put it together to read words. But at some point, you transition into sight reading, where you recognize the word from far away. So you could read a whole line, very quickly in a book, for example. You're not sounding out each letter. You're recognizing the whole chunk of letters together. And often you're recognizing entire chunks of phrases. You just see them and you don't have to even read each word. You just you see it and you know the whole sentence. We produce language the same way. As I'm speaking to you, I'm not thinking about the tenses and all that. It's just coming out. So there are better and worse course books. There are some that do teach language in chunks. But if you're having trouble with a particular tense, let's say the past perfect, I had never, it's hard for me to think of examples. If someone says, give me an example of the past perfect, I hadn't eaten. Okay, I thought of one. Sometimes it's quite difficult to think of one, and it's because it's out of context and it doesn't make sense. You could learn something like, I hadn't eaten. And when do we use that? Well, I was hungry yesterday. Why? I hadn't eaten all day. I skipped breakfast, for example. You don't have to learn the ins and outs of the past perfect to use the past perfect. You just have to know those chunks of language. Language is all about pattern recognition, and so you have to use that to your advantage. If you're in a class, hopefully your teacher will be teaching it to you that way. If you're on your own, you could learn it that way. But it's not enough to hear it and to write it down. You need to speak to people. You need a community, and that's a classroom or some space where you're communicating in English. You could use something like Reddit to talk with people, or other forums online. You need meaningful conversation where you're trying to convey something and they're trying to understand and give you more information. It's really, really important. This is why lots and lots of speaking in a classroom are extremely important. Please don't just sit in the corner quietly. You're doing yourself a disservice. Now, if it's different if you're just starting to learn English and maybe you're very young, especially kids. They're at different developmental stages, and often they do just need to sit in a class for a year and hear other people speaking, and magically they come out of their shell. That happens. It does happen to adults as well, but not as often. Usually if I have a shy adult in a classroom, they will stay shy, no matter how many times they come back. So at the end of the day, your approach to learning English should match your goals. If you have an exam coming up, you should absolutely focus on the grammar that you need to know for that exam. Sometimes an exam is just a hurdle in your way. You need to pass it so you can move on with your life. I get that, and in that case, absolutely learn about the language. Some people find learning grammar motivating. They really, really like it, and in that case, by all means, learn it. That's wonderful. But don't let that be your only focus, and don't let fluency slip by. Don't put it on the side. It really should be the most important thing. Again, no matter how accurate you are, if you can't say what you want to say, then it doesn't really matter, right? So fluency first, accuracy second, and the more fluent you become, you'll actually become more accurate automatically because you'll be listening more, engaging more with the language, and naturally just using the language properly. Your brain will remember those chunks of language and produce them. The key is to understand that they serve different purposes. I hope today brings you an opportunity to learn something amazing, or at least live your life to